Hello everyone and welcome to Just Films and That. This is the podcast that celebrates films we reckon might be underrated or underseen. I'm Alice Oliver and I'm your host for this week, and it was Josh's turn to pick and he went with Punisher Warzone from 2008. So let's get stuck in. Alright then Josh, so as I said, it was your turn to pick the film this week, Punisher Warzone from 2008, so spoiler warning listeners if you haven't seen that. But first, Josh, do you want to tell our lovely listeners a bit about our Patreon that we've got going on?
Yes, so if you fancy a little bit of extra content, bonus episodes a day early, the ability to suggest films, get in touch, a few other bits and bobs, head on over to patreon.com/justfilmsandthat, and there's a few tiers there, and you can find a few bits in there. All tiers do include episodes a day early and bonus content, so extended episodes. So any support you can give us is massively appreciated, and the link for that is in the episode description to this, Alice.
Thank you very much, Josh. Always good to know. There you go, listeners. A little treat for you. Head over onto Patreon and see what we've got going on. But anyway, back to today's episode. And like I said, Punisher Warzone 2008. Spoiler warning, listeners. You have been warned twice now, so no excuses. So Josh, do tell us, what is this film about and why did you pick it?
So, Punisher Warzone is about the character of the Punisher from the comic books, who is Frank Castle. If you don't know, he's a comic book character who hasn't got any powers. He's an ex-special forces agent or ex-soldier or ex-summer, big hard guy whose family are killed in a mob hit. I think it's a mob hit in this. Varies depending on who's written it, but basically his family are killed, which sends him into a sort of murderous quest for vengeance where he basically hunts criminals down, and rather like your friendly unlike your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, he just blows them all to bits. It's literally
he's
that
like
is
the
it.
Opposite of that, isn't he?
He's like it's like Batman on a bad day, basically. He just goes around blowing people up, killing people in gruesome ways. Essentially, that is punishing people.
Oh,
Hence
there it
the
is.
name.
There it is.
This version of the character it's sort of it's basically that. It's him. He's going about his business, mourning the death of his family, taking down crime families. He comes across a crime boss who is played by Dominic West, called Billy Russo, who he tries to kill by putting in a glass machine that then turns him into the sort of disfigured villain Jigsaw. And it's about their battle with each other, really. Why did I pick this one? So, a couple of reasons. So there's one big reason, but I'll start with the general ones first. First of all, I think it's underrated. I think it was not well received when it came out. Now, it's very stylized, this film, which we'll come on to, so I can understand if you didn't like it. Underseen as well, didn't do well at the box office, but the main reason I want to pick it is, of course, that this film stars Ray Stevenson as Frank Castle and the Punisher. Now, Ray Stevenson sadly passed away this year. This was the first opportunity we had to pay tribute to him. I had a few of his films on my list anyway, and I thought, well, do you know what? I wanted to pick one where he was the biggest part of it.
The star, yeah.
Obviously, he's the lead in this. And he didn't do many leading roles. He was quite often a supporting character actor. If you think of things like he plays Volstagg in the Thor films, the MCU films. He's in King Arthur. He was in the TV series Rome. He's in the other guys. He's in loads of stuff. Whatever he's in, he's actually in the series Ahsoka, which will either be on Disney Plus now or will be coming out soon, depending on when we can get this out. So he sadly passed away this year, and I thought he's a bit of an underrated actor. You know, he's always turns up and delivers, and I thought he's a bit of an underrated actor. So why not give him a little bit of a tribute episode by picking this film, which, to be honest, was on my list anyway. So I take it you hadn't seen it before this episode then?
I hadn't seen it. I think I recognise that kind of skull image.
Yeah,
I've definitely seen that somewhere. But
the character's been done quite a few. He's in the MCU now. He's played by John Bernthal. He was. There's another Punisher film called The Punisher with Thomas Jane and John Travolta in it, and that is actually on my list as well. Spoilers, which I obviously won't pick for a while now that we've done this one. And there's an 80s version of the character with Dolph Lundgren as well. So it's quite, and it's also
a lot going on.
It's one of those images that, like, it's been on t-shirts all over the gaff. It's like Che Guevara.
Yeah.
so what did you like then?
Well,
I suppose did you like anything about it?
I did. Yeah. No, there was. You know what? There was quite a lot that I liked about it, and I did like it a lot more than I thought I was going to. I really enjoyed some of the action. And I loved a lot of the violence in it. So, like, it's pretty gruesome. And I
yeah.
that even though, obviously, the Punisher is our hero, but he's a real grim bastard, and he like snapping necks, using objects around him to smash and stab people with, and just using such a whole different array of violent techniques. I thoroughly enjoyed that. And the moment where Billy the Beaut falls into that glass processing machine thing and it gets switched on and completely just slices and dices him. Oh, I loved it. I thought that's dark.
It's a bit of me,
that's just, it's like, it shows you a little bit about him, doesn't it? It's like about inflicting maximum pain and suffering in that
punishment, isn't it? It's punishing, it's punishing people.
OMG, that's it. So yeah, I really liked a lot of the violence and a lot of the action, and I thought that was probably the strongest element of the film for me. What were some of your favourite things about it? And I suppose tell me a bit about your relationship with this film. Is this one? Was this like the first time you'd seen it in ages, or?
So it's interesting actually with this one. This is a film that I changed my mind on, and I don't mean now. Yeah. I mean, so I watched this when it came out. I'm quite a fan of the character and stuff like that, and I watched it when it came out, and I remember watching it thinking, "This is crap." And me and my housemate at the time watched it, and we were both, as far as I can remember, both thought it was rubbish, to the point where quoting it became a joke. Okay, so, you like the whole, did you know kidneys are a delicacy in Sweden? That bit. We always, we used to quote that bit to each other. And then, I don't know if that informed our opinion, but we both watched it again. And we're like, as in years later, and we're like, it's actually pretty good, isn't it? And we're like, yeah.
I love that. I love that for you.
Yeah, and I think at the time, I didn't get it. But when I look at it now, I'm like, no, it's so purely comic book. It's quite, of a lot of comic book films, I'd say this is one of the most faithful to the source material.
Oh, that's interesting.
Like, he looks like Frank Castle. He acts like Frank Castle. When he speaks like the character speaks. The violence is like this ain't your grandpappy's comic book character, right? So it is like the whole thing with the Punisher. It's like it goes hand in hand with violence. Now, I'm not like a guy like who I don't like love my violent films. I'm not that bothered on like gore or horror films or anything like that. If it's appropriate. If it's used well, that's always good or whatever. But in this, it's some ridiculous violence. And I think because it's so stylized, I didn't get it. And we've got some big performances in there, big moments, big set pieces. And it's like, this is a bit out there. But when you watch it, it's because I think it is trying to be so faithful to the character. I think it's also the first comic book film directed by a woman as well.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting. That is very interesting. And that will be a talking point a little bit later on, probably.
Oh, right. Okay. We'll come back.
I didn't realise that.
Well, so Patty Jenkins gets the credit a lot of the time for Wonder Woman, but Lexi Alexander directed this. It's just that I believe, from what I've read, so don't quote me on it, that the studio messed around with it quite a lot, and she sort of was like, "That's not really what I wanted to make."
Oh, interesting.
It's a bit of a bastardized version of what I wanted to make, but she gets the directing credit. So and she's definitely had some input because she clearly has, hasn't she? So so I love the look and feel of it, like you said there. It feels like a real comic book. It's some, like you said, good action in there. So there's some really daft moments. So I remember watching the bit where there's some guys in it whose character trait is parkour, and that's all they're there to do. They just jump about and sort of go woohoo, all the way through it. And at one point, he just blows one of them up with a rocket launcher, right? And I remember watching that first time around, thinking, "What the fuck?" Well, it's like so fucking random. Like, why is that? But when you watch it, it looks like a comic book panel. It's like he picks it up, cuts to the guy in midair, he blows up, and his mates look at him like, "Oh my god, they blew one of us up," like that. So I liked that. I like the feel of it. The performances as well. I've picked this because Ray Stevenson's the star. Listen, he's got a lot to do in this, but he's got a lot to do with physicality, because the Punisher is not a character that speaks loads. This isn't an Aaron Sorkin film. This isn't Rocky giving big speeches. He does a lot of grunting and a lot of 1 or 2 line responses and stuff like that. Frank Castle is supposed to be this sort of broken man, absolutely apathetic to the world, doesn't give a shit, just kills anyone or anything that gets in his way. And I think you get that from his performance. He's very physical. I know he did a lot of training for this. If you go on YouTube, you can find videos of him preparing, and he definitely put the yards in the same sort of way that someone like Keanu Reeves does for John Wick and well, any action film pretty much. But so I do think, you know, he is really good in it, and he has a lot to do with his physical presence, which isn't easy all the time, because as an actor, what you want to do is speak. It's all about the dialogue, isn't it? Well, a lot of actors, it's all about the dialogue. I know there's perfectly fantastic actors like Doug Jones who aren't all about the dialogue and stuff like that. But anyway, rest of the cast as well. I mean, Dominic West, man. He's just having it. He's having the time of his life.
Yeah.
I think this is the second Dominic West film we've done after Pride. And in both films, there's just a guy just loving what he's doing.
Always nice to see.
Yeah, I mean, you can never tell if they do or don't love what they're doing, but it certainly comes across like he's just gone, I'm going to shoot the fuck out of some scenery in this film. I love that Doug Hutchinson as well as LBJ. I suppose we should say trigger warning. One of the characters is called Looney Bin Jim, which is obviously not
his name is James. It's not Looney Bin Jim. He's not LBJ.
It's not a correct way of referring to it, but these are ignorant mobsters, I suppose. So that's why he is called that. But yeah, do you know what? I just feel like there's just a lot of like real campy, funny, out there performances. You know, the bit where Jigsaw rounds the goons up and he gives them the pattern speech in front of the American flag and stuff like that.
Funny you should bring that up, Josh, because that was probably one of, if not my favourite moment of the film, and I'd written a whole bit about it in my notes. But yeah, go on.
Let's hear what you think then, because I've yammered on and on there.
I just thought it was excellent. It was just a brilliant piece of dark comedy, isn't it? So he's going around sort of recruiting these like criminals and stuff to be in his militia that he's putting together to take down the Punisher. And he stood in front of this screen that's got the American flag on it, giving this really impassioned speech, you know, as if he's like this true brilliant leader and all this. And I just love the kind of the sort of imagery that's then going along with what he's saying and the whole vibe of it. I was just like, this is cool. I was like, this is just such a cool moment. The whole thing I thought it was really well constructed, and it was a really great moment in the film. I thought it was one of my faves.
To write that in a script, the villain stands in front of a flag as it like some sort of despotic leader.
Yeah.
And gives a speech.
Looking how he does. Sounding how he does.
You've got to be writing that thinking, we better get this right, otherwise I'm going to look like an idiot.
Yeah.
But it's very, it's quite Jack Nicholson's Joker, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
There's a bit in the Jack Nicholson Joker film, Batman, where he dances around the museum to the Prince song. And you're like, some point someone wrote the Joker and his men dance around an art gallery, destroying it and doing Joker pictures whilst Prince plays. And some, you can imagine getting that script being like, we better nail this.
Yeah, because reading this out loud, I'm not so sure. But yeah, the execution, brilliant.
Yeah. So what else? What did you like? What did you like generally about it?
So I did really like kind of how wacky the whole thing is, really. Like, we're not going for realism here, but I don't think that's to the film's detriment at all. And it actually made it really fun at times and kept the momentum up and the energy up a lot, I thought. Like, it didn't feel boring, and it definitely didn't feel like it dragged. I thought the way that the actors were framed a lot of the time was really interesting and really effective as well. So very often they would just be a little bit too far to the right of the frame or too far left. And then sometimes they'd have like the tops of their heads just poking up outside of the frame. And I really enjoyed this technique. Kind of made it all feel a bit more immersive. It sometimes made their interactions feel a bit more authentic and less constructed. And then some of the editing to go along with that, I thought, contributed to that as well, because the film doesn't just do like a reverse shot in keeping with when certain characters are speaking. So it's not just like, oh, you're speaking now, so we're looking at you. Oh, and you're speaking now, so we're looking at you. Like, you'd often move around different characters in the room and cut between them at different times during a conversation. And I really enjoyed that, because it's so easy to just do, well, person A is talking now, so we look at them. Person B is talking now, so we look at them. And that's, basic winning formula, obviously. So I just kind of like that it was a little bit, it just made it feel a bit more, the word I want to use is natural, but I don't know if that's right.
I think immersive. I think when you say immersive, because it's like the whole thing of using handheld cameras to do action sequences. It makes you feel like you're right up in it, and that
exactly
obviously helps really engage you. I think it's quite because it means you have to. I suppose what they do is they make you have to sit up and watch.
Yes.
If they make it too easy to watch the film, it's just like you say, oh, he's talking to B, B's talking to A, cut back and forth. You know, it's like watching the news with noddies, isn't it? It's you know, whereas if you go, oh, you have to sit up and engage with this, either it'll completely disengage you and go, well, I don't want to have to do any work, or it'll go, oh, actually, it's quite interesting.
Yeah, and obviously it was enough that I noticed it and was able to recognise that actually this is enhancing the character interactions a lot, and I did really enjoy that. So we'll move on now then to talking about anything that we didn't like about the film, or perhaps anything that we would change. I'm really interested in this from you, Josh, because to go from... This has only ever happened to... No, it has happened to me a couple of times, actually, where you feel like you were wrong about a film, and you go back and watch it, and you actually see the value in it. So I'm interested to know if some of those original thoughts that you did have still stood, or if you found new things to not like about it, or if you maybe... liked everything about it.
No, so I've definitely found new things looking at it with a critical eye. I suppose you got to bear in mind when I watched this first time around, it would have been like 1920, so we're talking 10 plus years ago. Not that I'm in my 30s now. That'd be embarrassing. But
embarrassing, it's embarrassing for you.
But I think when I first watched it, I don't think I got it because I think it is so out there. And it is so stylized. You could say, you could call it campy, you could call it stylized, you could call it balls to the wall. Whatever it is, they picked a style and they went with it. And that style was, they went big. Do you know what I mean? They surrounded this character who doesn't really speak with big characters, and big effects, I suppose. So particularly the villains are that when we're talking about performances, it's the villains, right? But also some of the action. There is a bit in this film where he literally punches through a grown man's skull. I mean, to do that, you'd have to be... I mean, is there a human who is strong enough to do that? I don't know. I'm not a scientist, but...
Hathor Bjornsson. My money is on him, if anyone.
If you think about how... If you've ever done any martial arts boxing or even just hurt your hand by accidentally slipping and hitting something, or even been in a fight, Alice, let's say it. Some people out there have been in fights. It fucking hurts to punch something. So to punch through a full... It's not just like... It's a full-grown dude. So some of the... So I think maybe things like that in the rocket launcher sequence and kidneys and applesauce made me, when I was younger, go... This is too out there. But I suppose when I watched it, it was your Nolan Dark Knights and the start of the MCU. So it was like, no, we're going to do this properly. We're going to take this seriously. And all superhero films are a post 9/11 allegory about, about savior syndrome and all that sort of stuff. But actually, it's just balls to the wall fun. And I think this film is quite fun.
Yeah, I agree.
But there is stuff I didn't like about it. So the first thing I think is it's actually a little bit too physically dark in places.
Sure.
There was places like, I don't know what's going on here, and I've seen this before. So there's a little bit of that. There's some real cliched dialogue in there, which I don't mind to some degree when you're doing comic booky stuff. But he has a conversation with, it's not Soap, is it Bodansky in the church? Colin Salmon's character. He has a character with him, and he literally... There's a bit where I counted the cliched pieces of dialogue. At one point, they say to each other, I took an oath. What book do you think they're using? And the clock's ticking. I was like, that is right out the fucking... The playbook of, well, I can't think of anything to happen. Just, clock's ticking. Like, just say nothing. Say nothing. Just walk off. But anyway, so there's a little bit of that. The main issue I have, and it does come back to the script, but it's more to do with the development of the character and some of the exposition, particularly early on, which is, I think this is a film made for Punisher fans. So I think there isn't loads to tell you about the character's background. Obviously, he's based on a pre-existing character in a comic book, so I think a lot of how you form an attachment to Frank is knowing what's happened to him. So if you take example, I'm not going to sit here and compare it to the other one too much because we haven't done the other one, but the other one, the one I mentioned with John Travolta in it and Thomas Jane, it's like an origin story. So it's like how he ends up as the Punisher, and you form that emotional attachment to him because you watch him go through what he goes through and go through all this horrible trauma. Whereas in this, you get a few flashbacks, but actually you never get that, and this is what's going on. It just, you're straight in the world, and he's doing his thing, and that worked for me as a fan of the comic books. But I can see how watching it from the outside, you'd be like, I don't know what's going on here. Why should I give a shit? So I could understand that. So I do think perhaps there is an issue with forming that attachment to Frank as a character. If you didn't go, I don't think if you don't, when this is at the cinema in the heady days of 2008. I don't think if you don't know the character, you're not going to the cinema and going 1 or 2 for Punisher Warzone, please.
Yeah, probably. I would. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not in the same way you would, And there are film genres we talked on before which have real wide appeal, and comic books were big at the time because we're talking, the same year as The Dark Knight. I'm not sure where it came out in relation to that, but this is when comic book films were emerging as the big blockbuster genre, and this is an 18, so obviously you narrow down your audience, but I don't see people going and saying 1 please for Punisher Warzone who aren't Punisher fans. So I can see, I can understand why this wasn't a hit with the critics, which we'll obviously come on to, but that's why I picked it amongst other reasons. And I can also see why it didn't make loads of money. That still doesn't mean I'm wrong, I suppose. So what about you then? I know you've said a few things there. What didn't you like about it?
So there are a few things, and the main thing for me is something that is just completely my opinion and probably something completely based on my tastes, but I still think I'm 100% right. So the biggest issue for me with this is that it really should have had either a heavy metal score or an EDM score throughout, right? So every now and then, you'd get a bit of a heavy metal song playing as part of the soundtrack. So usually when we were with the bad guys and they were doing something, so there's one moment near the end where Psychosocial by Slipknot starts playing as Jigsaw's, militia are walking through the streets. And this was awesome. Like, it was an awesome moment. It only lasted about 8 or 9 seconds, but I was like, yes, this is what the whole film should have been. But whenever we're with the Punisher and he's doing anything, it was like a classical orchestral score with, lots of string instruments. And I feel like this was such a missed opportunity. And I think heavy metal or EDM throughout would have elevated the whole thing so much and would have felt more in keeping with what the Punisher is all about, given my very narrow sort of experience of the Punisher, which is just this film. And it would have been more in keeping with the whole vibe and the aesthetic of the film. So because the orchestral stuff really stood out, it felt too old-fashioned for the film, I thought, and a little bit boring. So it sort of felt like the score was created completely separately of the film. Like they just went to a composer and just went, oh, we need a score for an action film. Can you do it? And he's just gone, well, okay, I guess I'll just do the classic, strings, bit of wind, maybe the odd drum or whatever.
He's thinking about his family and it's all very sad.
That sort of thing. But I think if you watched the film first and then were tasked with devising a score for it, it would have been bit more like The Matrix, bit more EDM or a bit more heavy metal. And in my opinion, and I do think I'm right, that would have just suited the character so much more. It would have gone so much better with the action scenes, with all that violence. And after I'd noticed that, it was only about 10 or 15 minutes in where I was like, I was expecting it to be, I think, was it Tomb Raider that we did with Angelina Jolie? That was pretty heavy metal. And I was like, that's a good soundtrack here. That is a good score for that.
You've got to pick a theme, haven't you? I think, and I don't mean obviously theme, not the theme music. I mean, like you say, if you had that consistency, if you look at something like The Matrix, it has that all the way through, doesn't it? Or even if you think of not necessarily an action film, but like as soon as you said EDM, I thought about Bronson. Because that's got that sort of EDM all the way through it. And the director uses that a lot, doesn't he? That sort of pulsating music all the way through it. Yeah, I think you've got a really good point there, actually.
Oh, good. Thank you. I appreciate that feedback because I was just thinking, and then for me to be thinking that and for there to be these moments of heavy metal music playing while stuff was happening just kind of proved my point. And I was like, this is so much cooler when those type of songs are playing along with these action sequences. So that was the big thing for me that I was like, oh man, you missed a trick here. The other thing was the female representation in this film is shocking, right?
Yes,
so you've got Nikki Donatelli's wife, whose name I don't even know. She's played by Julie Benz because I know that she's Darla in Buffy and Angel, and this is the only thing I've seen her in other than Buffy and Angel, so it was nice to see her. But I don't even know her name. She's literally got about 10 lines of dialogue through the whole thing, even though she's in the film quite a lot. She barely says anything. And then you've got this like elderly mum character who is the mum of, is the
Micro.
guy who was in Third Rock from the Sun and Jurassic Park.
Yeah, Wayne.
What's the
So it's
fella?
Microchip. So Microchip's like his
That
tech guy.
Is
and
M
his,
or
his
whatever,
elderly
yeah, or
mother.
his Q.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's
she was
cute,
another
yeah.
female character. She didn't say anything and got her head blown off. And
The
there was
little
a female
girl.
police. There was the little girl. She had a couple of lines. And then there was the female police officer who was on screen for probably less than a minute and didn't have any lines of dialogue before she then got killed. And I was just like, I want a female gangster, or I want a female detective. I want a female inspector. I just want to see just anything. And I was like, maybe the wife character is going to get better. Maybe she's going to have a moment or something, but she just doesn't. And so then when you said before that it was directed by a woman, I was like, I find that really surprising. And like, so if the source material is all blokes, then that's fine. And I try not to like pick up on this stuff too much, because if you went back and analysed all the films throughout history, you'd be here forever saying this is wrong, this is fucked up. Do you know what I mean? But it felt just really obvious in this. I think because A, because it was from 2008, and B, because it would have been so easy to just put a woman in there. Like maybe Billy the Beaut had like a girlfriend or a wife or an accomplice or something. Like anyone.
Yeah, or you could make one of the detectives that goes after him. A woman. So again, so Looney Bin Jim is not in the comics, so they've written a new character. So you could have made that
if you fucking
Looney Bin
invented
Jane
new characters, then yeah, exactly.
That's what I mean. That could have been Looney Bin Jane. So there's no reason why it could have. No, do you know what? And again, that's I suppose that's me watching it as a bloke, isn't it? Because I'm so used to seeing myself represented on screen, and particularly in films like this. That I've never really picked up on that, but you're absolutely right, and it's especially strange considering it is directed by a woman.
Yeah, and it felt strange, and it felt just super obvious, because obviously I went into it thinking like, oh, it's going to be about the normal amount of bad female representation. I was like, that's fine, I expect it or whatever.
Yeah,
but
just standard 2008 shit female representation.
It was worse, and I was like, really, nothing? You're not going to give me anything? Anyway, so that was a bit annoying and a bit dumb.
So here's one for you then. We always say what we don't like or what we change. So here's what I'd change then. Frank's wife speaks to him all through the film. That's how I'd change if I was going to do it.
Oh, like a ghostly, like a conscience voice sort of thing.
Like a Jiminy Cricket, but it's his dead wife.
Yeah, Jiminy Cricket.
She is the thing that fills him with the desire to keep doing what he's doing. So like in the way that like Inception, the perception of Marianne Cotillard's character is that she's the villain and she's always setting the dreams and stuff like that. But when they asked Josie Gordon-Levitt, she says, "Oh no, in real life she was lovely." So it's like Frank's perception. So it's his wife constantly being like, "Keep killing these fuckers." Do you know what I mean? Or something. Cool. Or she doesn't even have to be like that. She could just be there speaking to him.
No, that would be cool. That's definitely the cooler way to do it, is like that she's like burning red hot with like rage and vengeance as well at the whole thing.
Yeah, she represents the anger or whatever.
Yeah. Or even like, say, Nikki Donatelli's wife, say actually he ends up being she is secretly really good at like martial arts or something, or she has like a fucking assault rifle, or and it turns out she's actually hardcore and she wants to come and shoot a load of bad guys as well, and something like that. Another thing as well is, so I didn't love any of the characters. I didn't really care what happened to anyone. I think the character development isn't really a strength here. Everyone feels really superficial. And I'm not going to say much more about that because it's an action film. Like, you kind of expect it to a certain degree. And you did kind of touch on it before, as it's more about the action and the spectacle. And also, if you already have some prior knowledge about the Punisher, maybe it's not as much of a big issue. But I didn't know these characters. I didn't know, these people sort of thing. So I could have done maybe with a bit more going on development-wise.
They're all pretty one-dimensional.
They are.
They're good. I think, like I've said, the actors are good with what they're given, but...
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
It's not a character piece.
No. It's guns and knives and glass and
punching
kicking
through
your
skulls.
fucking head in. Exactly. Yeah. That is exactly it. And just finally, and this one is really silly because like we've already said, we're not looking for realism here, but just one thing that really stood out to me, so I have to mention it. So, Nikki Donatelli is an undercover FBI agent, right? Mm-hmm. He's infiltrated a really dangerous group of people and then he gets killed whilst on the job. So after his funeral, his wife and his young child just go back to their house, to their normal house where they lived with this man who is now seriously pissed off some very dangerous people, right? They have no protection. There are no police officers watching over the house from outside. They're not sent away to witness protection or anything like that. And this just felt absolutely crazy. And then later on, everyone's like, oh no, Billy the Beaut is going after Donatelli's wife for revenge. And I was just like, well, duh, obviously he's going to do that. So I was like, you're already just getting that now? And I couldn't let this one go. Like, of all the things in there that were just like, oh, would that really happen though? This one just really stood out to me. Because I was like, I think the moment that really drew attention to it was the Punisher obviously turns up at her house to say, like, to give her some money and say, like, I'm sorry and that. And I was like, how is he just able to turn up at her house? And
just
they're not
walk
cops
up to
outside?
the house?
Yeah.
Like, imagine, like, to get escorted. Imagine being escorted back to the house and the agent being like, right, I'll leave you to it then.
Exactly,
Let you get settled then.
I was like, what is happening?
Like when someone's staying at your house and you show them to their room. Yeah, that's where you are there. We've left you a towel. So shower's just there. Don't
worry about the gangsters.
Yeah,
don't worry about the
right,
notorious criminal.
Hey,
he's one of the most dangerous people on our books.
You look after yourself.
A man so dangerous that we had to get your husband, an FBI agent, to go undercover to try and bring him down.
God, I hope he doesn't set his incredibly athletic brother free.
So yeah, I was just like, oh, come on, guys. But that was it for me. Overall, I think, like you said, it's a lot of fun. It's energetic, good momentum, and I do love me a bit of stylish violence, I gotta say. We'll move on now then to talking about the critical reception. So you think it's underrated? I can probably see that the critics were massively into this. Audience-wise, I think if what you said is accurate, that sort of Punisher fans and maybe comic book fans are going to see this, and there's probably a lot in there for them. So I think I would probably give this a high 6, which is quite good for me. So I think it probably got. I feel like I want to say like a 6 bang on.
Right, okay, and you think that was you think that was underrated if it was.
I think that was a little bit underrated, Jess. So go on.
Okay, so let me tell you, it's so much worse.
Oh dear! Oh
it's so much worse. So at the time of recording, I'd give it about what you'd say as well. So like it's like a high 6, it's a 7, maybe 7 for me because I'm a little bit more attached to it. At the time of recording on IMDb, it gets 5.9 out of 10, and you think, okay, it does no get better than that. Because over on Rotten Tomatoes, the audience give it 42%. Okay. And the critics give it 29%. So that averages out, I think, just under 4.5 out of 10 or 45%.
Oh dear.
So that's the
Punisher sure got punished.
Yep. I hope he doesn't hear about it.
Who punishes the Punisher? I think they say that in the film.
That is literally a line in that.
Yeah.
And then in terms of box office, just for the underseen element as well, it was budgeted at $35 million. And according to the best figures I could find, it made worldwide 10. So it didn't even make a third that surprises of its budget back. Yeah.
I am really surprised by that.
What say you?
Gosh. I would have to say that is underrated. I think that is mean. I can see that there are issues in it, but it's one of them where you've got to adjust. And this is the thing that the critics, I don't think they do, is it? You've got to adjust your thinking. It's like when you're 5 minutes into this, you've got to think, oh, okay, we're not going for highbrow, sophisticated, well-written story, brilliantly developed characters. We're just going for big action, knives, guns, violence, bad guys. Ugh. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
once you're in that mindset, it's good and it does what it's meant to. But if you don't put yourself in that mindset, then maybe you wouldn't like it. Ultimately, I do think that's underrated, and I think that from the critics is a little bit harsh. What about you? I mean, I think I know what you would say.
I fully agree. So are we saying underrated and underseen?
I think so, yeah. 10 mil.
There we go. Underrated, underseen, and just to finish as well, rest in peace, Ray. Well, there we go. Another episode in the bag, another underrated and underseen. So happy with that. Do make sure you check it out. If you like your stylized mad violence, this is definitely one. If you want to see a man shoot another man in the face with a shotgun from less than a meter away in front of a child, you'll like this one. You'll like this one. So yes, we will be back next week with another episode in your podcast feed. So do be sure to check that out. In the meantime, if you'd like to get in touch with us, it's filmsandthatpod@gmail.com. We're on all the social medias: Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. So it's for Just Films and That. Give us a follow. We're always putting content, film-related stuff out there where we can. And engage with us. Always nice to see you. But obviously, it's great that you're listening. So thank you very much for that. Tell you what, we're also on the television as well, aren't we, Alice?
We are indeed. Every Friday from 6 p.m, you can find me and Josh talking about all our favourite underrated and underseen films on the local TV network. So if you live in Birmingham, Bristol, Leeds, Liverpool, or the north east of England, you can find us on Channel 7 on Freeview. Or if you live in North Wales or South Wales, you can find us on Channel 8 on Freeview. I'm also uploading all the videos to Dailymotion, so make sure you go on over there, type in Just Films and That, and you'll be able to see exactly what we're up to wherever you are in the world. Thank you.
Yes, lots of ways to see us, hear us, get in touch with us, engage with us, all that sort of stuff. But thank you as ever for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode. It's goodbye from me. Cheerio.
Bye.